Hey everyone, and in this video I'm going to be giving my review and thoughts on Pinocchio 2022, Disney's live-action remake of the original animated classic of the same name. Now there's been many different media interpretations of Pinocchio and more than one attempt to do it in live action, but this is Disney's Pinocchio, which means like all their other live action remakes they've done based on films based on old fairy tales, that means pretty much all of the movie, the remake, draws from the animated classic, to which most if not all audiences are more familiar with, and that source material is more iconic than the actual original book or whatever that material was based on. Now, unsurprisingly, the core Disney story of Pinocchio remains intact with this remake, with the story, the characters, villains, story beats, which means even most of the intrigue of the film is seeing these various changes, additions, artistry, and of course, is if what they're doing actually good. Now, for me, the original Pinocchio is a top 5 Disney animation film of all time. You know, it was only their second feature film released in 1940, but the film's artistry, animation, songs, and the twisted, demented nature of the story and film made for a sort of early golden age of Disney at its best. Thankfully, the core story of Pinocchio isn't really a dated one, and one that can work fine today if done right. Now, I had forgotten about this until the credits rolled in this film, but this film is directed by Robert Zemeckis, an iconic director who has a really sort of stellar filmography, at least in the first half of his career, with stuff like the Back to the Future trilogy, Forrest Gump, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Castaway, among others. Now, 2 out of those 4 films show how he knows how to work with Tom Hanks, who plays Geppetto in this film. Now, I love Tom Hanks. He's obviously, probably one of the top 3 actor for me of all time. And he's mostly good here, although the early part of the film portrays Geppetto more of almost like a madman than sort of the lovable gentle clockmaker that he is in the original film. You watch the early part of this film, you just say to yourself, damn, this guy is kind of crazy, and that's not sort of the vibes that the original film gave off. I did love, though, the whole Easter egg cameo type stuff they did with the clocks in his house. That scene was a lot of fun every time those clocks would come on. But overall, I thought Hanks was mostly good. Just some of the stuff they did with Geppetto. It's a little bit of a different interpretation, but I guess not too radically different from the original animated Geppetto that everyone knows. Most of the other main characters dealt with in this film are CG in one way or the other. Jiminy Cricket acts and functions in mostly the same way that he did in the original, even right down to the voice and all that stuff. He was fine. Jiminy's probably the iconic Disney sidekick, and I guess they did a smart thing in not making him too different from what he was originally, because that's what most audiences love, is that Jiminy Cricket. Then you got the Blue Fairy, who has a lot of CG involved in her look. I thought the dress and the effects for her were great. That stuff was fantastic. The actual look in terms of the actress they got for her, I think they kind of missed the point of what the Blue Fairy was meant to represent in the original. Now, this has nothing to do with race. I'm not going in that direction. Just more so them going with such a weirdly sort of radical design and style towards like, y'all kind of missed the point of what the Blue Fairy was supposed to represent. Just remove race out of it. Although the actress that they did get was a great singer, though, and that song was done pretty well, When You Wish Upon a Star. The character that I had the most fun watching here was Honest John. I loved the voice. Again, he functions in the same way in the story that he did in the original, but I thought his scenes were really fun, and the CG was, pretty solid for a film that's, just going straight to Disney Plus and not theatrical. In terms of your 2 main human antagonists, Stromboli and the Coachman, Stromboli was fine, more or less the same kind of stuff he did in the original film, although I will say that the original was better in that way. There was just something a little bit more menacing about him. The Coachman here, while not terrible, I did think was a significant downgrade from his unbelievably sinister version we saw in the original. The Coachman in the original Pinocchio film is not thought of as one of those iconic Disney villains, but he's probably the most sinister and just most demented. He's just like, whoa, this guy is just really kind of messed up in the head. How he has sort of no sort of qualms about doing this stuff to little kids. They do, and that's not really captured as well in this film, unfortunately. Could have been better in that aspect. Although I did think the stuff they did with his goons and henchmen was pretty interesting, an interesting interpretation. It's one that works, especially when you see with what they are in the original. They're actually really creepy. And then you get to your titular character himself, Pinocchio. Now, the best thing this movie does is his design, which is taking that original model, character style, whatever, that we saw in the original film, and just 3D-ifying it for live action. It really helps this film feel like Disney's Pinocchio, just because that design just works so well for that interpretation, Disney's interpretation of that character, who's pretty much here just taken straight out of that original film and just put into this one. The movie pulls also a lot of the songs that we saw in the original, although there were some notable exclusions, omissions, like Give a Little Whistle. But I thought the song that was done the best here was I've Got No Strings on Me. That scene was really fun, especially the stuff they did with Pinocchio in this film. Another sort of omission I mentioned when it came to Give a Little Whistle. Another key omission is stuff like, again, with the coachman, the key scene that introduces his character from the original. That scene was missing. I thought that was a really kind of curious decision. And other stuff here and there, which is surprising when this film ends up being about, I don't know, about 10 or 15 minutes longer than the original. Probably the most pointless addition here in the film was one, a talking seagull. That actually was pretty terrible. I don't know what they were thinking when it came to that. And then the other, there is a female puppeteer in Stromboli's show who helps Pinocchio, and she's got like sort of a leg disability. Not terrible, and I like the actress that played her and the character, but in the grand scheme of things, she wasn't really all that necessary. Most of the enjoyment I got from this film was just seeing how sort of those elements from the OG film translated to live action. That's most of the fun that comes with these live action remakes that go in sort of this direction with their stories. Do I think it's a good movie on its own? That's a question that's almost impossible for me to answer when it comes to these remakes that really sort of follow the story to a T, because you just can't really separate what you know from the original. You know, it's easier to pass judgment on stuff like Maleficent, Cruella, Dumbo, or even Mulan, just because they separate themselves from the original story, at least a lot more than this did. Whereas stuff like The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, and this do not do this. Whether or not you think that's a good or bad thing, well, that is up to you. I was happy to see that the horror factor when it came to Lampwick's donkey transformation was kept intact, and I did like, I thought the Monstro sequence was fun, although the design they went for Monstro kind of threw me off. I don't know if that's how it's meant to be in the original version of the book, whatever, but here it's more sea monster than whale. That was an interesting interpretation. All I can say is that I didn't hate the film. You know, I don't think it's a terrible way to spend roughly about an hour and a half. Although it still only get probably about a 6 out of 10 for me, maybe no higher than 6.5, but you know, in that range. You know, the actual ending of the film, I really did kind of make me scratch my head, saying like, really, that's what y'all went with? But oh well, it is what it is. You know, like I said, I didn't think this was a terrible live action remake. It's kind of like middle of the pack, more sort of workmanlike than anything, but one that wasn't terrible to watch. You know, in the end, it's Disney's Pinocchio, and you know what you're getting. You know, just this time it's in live action. And thankfully it's on Disney Plus, so, you know, at least you're not going to have to go out to the theater to see it. So that'll do it for my review and thoughts on Pinocchio 2022, Disney's Pinocchio 2022, since there's multiple Pinocchio films coming out this year, I guess. So that'll do it for this review and video. If you made it to the end, thank you for watching.